the Psalms teach that singing to Adonai is good. Our rabbis teach that it is also good to let Adonai sing to us, and especially good to allow Hashem to sing within us. Tonight, Adonai, we sing to you, and we invite you to sing within us all.
ובחוצות sing some prophecies from the books of Malachi, and Isaiah.
Hine Anochi sholeach lachem Delia Hanavi Lifnei bo Yom Adonai Yom Adonai. Behold, I send you Elijah the prophet, Eliah Hanavi, before the coming of the great and terrible day. Agadol Ve'anova. He'll set the hearts of the parents to the children, and the hearts of the children to the parents. La 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 la. Beautiful on the mountains are the feet of the messenger who proclaims peace. Shalom, who brings good tidings, who proclaims salvation. Aimanavu Mashmiya Shalom, Shalom, I'm a Vaser Tov, Mashmiya Yeshua. Burst forth and sing together, you waste places of Jerusalem, for Adonai has comforted our people. The voice of your watchmen are raised on high. Together they are singing. For eye to eye they see the return of Yerushalayim. Anochi sholeach lachem Eliah Navi lifnei bo Yom Adonai Yom Adonai. Behold, I send you Elijah the prophet, Eliah Navi, before the coming of the great and terrible day. Agadol Ve'hanora. He'll set the hearts of the parents to the children, and the hearts of the children to the parents.
stronghold of Israel. Arise to the help of Israel. Deliver Judah and Israel as thou hast promised. Our Redeemer, thou art the Lord of hosts, the Holy One of Israel.
Well, you probably know that there are a lot of Schlemiels in this world. But you probably don't know that the very first Schlemiel came from where else but the village of Chelm. He had a wife, Mrs. Schlemiel, and they had a child, little Schlemiel. Now, every day Mrs. Schlemiel would go to the marketplace and sell vegetables. Schlemiel's job was to stay at home, and he was supposed to rock the baby to sleep, and he also took care of the rooster that lived in the house with them. Now, one night, Mrs. Schlemiel prepared a huge pot full of delicious, thick jam. Now, she wanted to save this jam because Hanukkah was coming up, and she needed the jam for the latkes, the holiday pancakes. She also knew that if she left that jam at home when she went to the marketplace, Schlemiel had a sweet tooth, there wouldn't be any jam. So the next morning, she called Schlemiel over to her, and she said, "Schlemiel, I have 3 things to tell you, very, very important." All right, what? First of all, whatever you do, don't let the baby fall out of the cradle. All right, I'll take care of the baby. What else? Number 2, very important. No matter what happens, don't let the rooster out of the house. Okay, I'll take care of the rooster. No, what else? Number 3, very important. There's a pot full of poison right there on the shelf. Be careful. Don't eat it or you'll die. Schlemiel said, all right, and Mrs. Schlemiel left the house. Well, the first thing that Schlemiel did, of course, was to rock the baby to sleep. And while he rocked the baby to sleep, he sang a little song to the baby, like this. I am a big Schlemiel, you are a little Schlemiel. When you grow up, you will be a big Schlemiel. And I will be an old Schlemiel. Yay-di-di-di-di-di. And when you have children, you will be a Papa Schlemiel, and I will be a Grandpa Schlemiel. Well, the baby, of course, fell asleep. And Schlemiel, well, he dozed off too. And he dreamed that he was the richest man in all of Chelm. He dreamed that he sat around all day with the other rich men of Chelm and played dreidel. And in his dream, Schlemiel knew a trick, so that whenever he spun the dreidel, it always landed on the winning gimel. And noblemen from countries far away came to Schlemiel and they said, Schlemiel, please, we need you to be our king. And Schlemiel said, nah. So they got down on their hands and knees and they begged, please, Schlemiel, only you can do the job. And finally Schlemiel said, all right. So they put him on a throne with a crown on his head, and Mrs. Schlemiel, now a queen, sat next to him. And between the two of them, they ate a huge latke pancake spread thick with jam. Schlemiel ate from one side and his wife from the other till their mouths met in the middle. Now Schlemiel was awakened from this sweet dream by the sound of the rooster crowing. Schlemiel jumped up, thinking it was the fire bell, and knocked the baby out of the cradle. And the baby started, but Schlemiel ran right to the window to see where the fire was. He opened the window, and the rooster flew out. Schlemiel hollered after the rooster, Rooster, come back here when my wife gets home. Oy, is she gonna holler? Oy, oy, oy. But the rooster didn't care, just hopped down the road. So Schlemiel came back in. The baby was still lying on the floor with a bump on his head the size of a grapefruit. Schlemiel picked up the baby, comforted the baby, put the baby back in the cradle, and started to sing the baby a different song. This time he sang, in my dream I was a rich Schlemiel, but awake I am a poor Schlemiel. In my dream I ate pancakes and jam, but awake I chew onion and bread. I think I'd be better off dead. Well, the baby fell asleep, but Schlemiel started to think about his troubles. The more he thought about it, he knew when his wife got home, ooh, and she saw the baby with the bump and the rooster gone, she was gonna holler. And when Schlemiel's wife hollered, Schlemiel trembled. The more he thought about it, he thought, what is the sense of such a life? He decided the best thing to do would be to end it. Schlemiel figured a dead Schlemiel doesn't hear when he's hollered at. But how to end his miserable life, how to do it. Then he remembered, of course, the pot full of poison. He got on a chair, he got that pot full of poison down, and he got ready to poison himself. This poison tastes sweet. Better sweet than bitter. Schlemiel liked it so much, he ate the entire pot full of jam. And then when he was done, he licked the sides entirely clean. Then he waited for the poison to begin to burn his insides. But nothing happened. And while he was waiting, he got thirsty. Now, for Schlemiel to go and get water, he would have had to have gone out of the house, gone to the well, fetched the water, brought it back in the house, and Schlemiel was lazy. But then he remembered that there were 2 bottles of apple cider that his wife was saving for the holidays. But apple cider was very expensive, but Schlemiel thought, when one is about to die, what's the point of saving money? So he went. He got those bottles of apple cider, and he drank them both entirely down. Then his insides began to burn, and he knew the poison was beginning to work. So he laid down to get ready to die. And while he was waiting, he fell asleep. Now this time he dreamed he was a king with 3 crowns on his head, one on top of the other. And in front of him were 3 golden pots, one filled entirely with pancakes, another filled entirely with jam, and another filled completely with apple cider. And in his dream, each time he soiled his beard from eating, a servant wiped it with a napkin. And his wife was still sitting next to him, and she said, "Ay, Schlemiel, of all the kings, you're the greatest." Schlemiel was awakened from this sweet dream, however, by the sound of the door opening. Schlemiel opened his eyes, and he heard his wife's voice. "Schlemiel, you forgot to light the lamp." Schlemiel thought, can it be I hear my wife's voice? No, I happen to be dead. Or can it be that the poison hasn't worked yet and I'm still alive? Schlemiel jumped out of bed just in time to see his wife light the lamp. "Schlemiel, what happened to the baby? Where's the rooster? Who drank my apple cider? What's going on here, Schlemiel?" "Quiet, dear wife. You will soon be a widow." "A widow? What are you talking? You look healthy as a horse. Come on, what's going..." "Please. I've poisoned myself." "Poison yourself? With what did you poison? I've eaten your pot full of poison." "My pot full of That was the jam I was saving for Hanukkah." "But you told me it was poison." "I told you that, you idiot, so that you wouldn't eat it, and now there won't be any jam left." And Schlemiel started to cry too. Not because he was sad. He was happy to be alive. And the baby woke up and heard them both, and the baby started. And pretty soon all of the neighbors heard, and they all came running, and pretty soon all of the neighbors knew the story of Schlemiel and the pot full of jam that was supposed to be a pot full of poison. And when Hanukkah came, the neighbors took pity on them, and they brought over more jam and more cider, and the rooster eventually came back. But as always in the village of Helm, whenever an unusual event occurred, the elders of Helm got together to ponder the true meaning of the incident. And for 7 days and 7 nights they sat and scratched their foreheads and tugged at their beards and thought. And after a week, they realized that the true meaning was that if a wife works in the marketplace and her husband stays at home and she has a baby in the cradle and a rooster in the house, she should never lie to her husband and tell him that a pot full of jam is a pot full of poison, or that a pot full of poison is a pot full of jam, even if he is lazy and has a sweet tooth and is a Schlemiel besides.
It's been told that my own great-great-grandfather was once counseled by the famous Rabbi Schlemiel of Zaslav, simply known as the Paradox Nonsense Rebbe. And this, according to unnamed sources in my family, is supposedly what happened. My great-great-grandfather told the Rebbe that he felt worthless, which was making him feel guilty, which was making him feel more worthless, which made him feel even more guilty. And so he told the rabbi he ended up doing nothing with his life. He then asked the rabbi what he should do. And Rabbi Shmuel of Zaslav, with all his wisdom and might, replied, "Listen, Boychik, you can't really do nothing with your life. You see, if you've done nothing, it's not nothing, it's something. You must not do nothing for it to be nothing, for once you do nothing, it's not nothing, it's something. And listen, even your worthless question isn't really that worthless, since it was worth not asking in the first place. And now that you've asked it, you can be sure that at least it's worth forgetting." And in the kishkes of my great-great-grandfather's soul, he seemed to understand what the rabbi was driving at. But he had one additional question that he had to have answered. And this had to do with the existence of God. You see, according to unnamed sources in my family, my great-great-grandfather was a very brilliant man, a learned student of Talmud and Torah, and yet he was a very logical man, having been influenced by the great philosophers of Europe. So he managed to muster up the chutzpah to tell Rabbi Shmuel his blasphemous theory that the existence of God was, God forbid, a lot of nonsense. And without as much as a blink, the famous Paradox Nonsense Rebbe knew just what to say. If God, God forbid, is nonsense, then this is what you sense. And if you sense no sense, it's not no sense, it's sense. You see, you have to not sense no sense for it to be no sense, for once you sense no sense, it's not no sense, it's sense. Does that make sense? Stunned, my great-great-grandfather said no. So Rabbi Shmuel said it again, but a little slower this time. If God, God forbid, is nonsense, then this is what you sense. And if you sense no sense, it's not no sense, it's sense. You see, you have to not sense no sense for it to be no sense. For once you sense nonsense, it's not nonsense, it's sense. Now, does that make sense? My flabbergasted great-great-grandfather never came to counseling to the rabbi again. But from that day forward, he always believed in his own self-worth and in the existence of God. How many sheep? Deborah, if it was 3,000 years ago, and if I was a shepherd with 100 sheep, I'd drive down to Los Angeles until I'd search all the tents until I found your father. And when I found him, I'd say, "Milty, how many sheep do you want for your beautiful youngest daughter?" And he'd say, "I want 75, and I'd say, "I'll give you 49. Then he'd say, "But for my Deborah, I must have more. She is my youngest, my most decent Mädel. With her, we didn't even have to use Dr. Spock. So for her, I must have at least 70 sheep." "But Milty," I'd beg, "you're a CPA. What's a few more sheep to a man like you?" "Me, I'm only a poor poet and I can't even sell my poems. With the extra sheep, I could fix Deborah's Toyota. I could buy her more grape nuts for breakfast." Then your father would turn to me and say, "Toyota, Schmoyota, grape nuts, schmate nuts. David, be a mensch. You want something good, you gotta pay for it. You want a bargain? Go to a bargain store." And I'd think, Milty, he's right. Like Solomon, he's got wisdom. So I'd say, "Okay, Milty, you're right. Take all my sheep. Take my tent on Al-Qaeda Street too. But just give me your Deborah." Then Milty would turn to me and say, "Listen, Boychik, it's not that easy either. This is not like the old days. My Deborah is very smart, a real Philadelphia lawyer. You gotta ask her." it's really up to her now. Oh, I'd say, that's okay. Deborah? Hello? Well, what I want to ask is, well, we'll see about this later. I'll ask you in, what I mean is, I think we should jump before we wait. Wait before we leave. I'll talk to you in a week or so. Milty, you're right. It's not that easy. My Uncle Irving used to say, you can drop dead any minute. And while you're falling to the ground, you've got to ask yourself very quickly, was it worth it? Was it really worth it? And by the time you hit the ground, you've got to answer yes or no. There is no maybe or we'll see about it later. It's black and white, yes or no. If you say no, you'll hit the ground like a boulder. Death will be an agony. Your life will flash before your eyes, and you'll hate everything you see. But on the other hand, if you happen to say yes, you won't even hit the ground. You'll continue falling, and while your life flashes before your eyes, you'll feel proud and wonderful and complete. It's just that simple. That's what my Uncle Irving used to say. Last Thanksgiving, my Uncle Irving finished his dinner, got up from the table, stretched his arms as if to fly, and started dropping to the ground. He was dropping dead right there in front of the whole family. As he was falling, I heard him holler, "Yes!" I smiled at his courage. The last that I heard, my Uncle Irving was still falling. As far as I know, he never hit the ground.
And I will set my glory among the nations, and they will see my judgments that I've done, and the nations will see my hand that I have laid on them, so my people will know their God from that day on. And then I'll not hide my face. I'll not hide my face any longer, for I've poured out my spirit on the house of Israel. I've poured out my spirit on my people. They'll know that Israel was captive for all their sins. I hid my face and gave them in the hand of their enemies. Now I will bring again the captivity of Jacob, and I'll have mercy and be jealous for my holy name. And then I'll not hide my face. I'll not hide my face any longer, for I've poured out my spirit on the hearts of Israel. I've poured out my spirit on my people. I'll not hide my face. I'll not hide my face any longer, for I've poured out my spirit on the hearts of Israel. I've poured out my spirit on my people. La 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 and then I'll not hide my face. I'll not hide my face any longer, for I've poured out my spirit on the house of Israel. I've poured out my spirit on my people, my people, my
A song to Hashem. Searching for you today among the shivering air and April rains, looking for a glimpse of your face, trying to sort out your shape in the sweet and spring-moist hills around me. I am hungry for some message from you that you might have sent by light or wind. Who knew that this would happen? That I could open like the soil and let your roots come into me. That the flower of you would pass through me on this spring day. I am so close to finding you. There, between the mist around those hills, some song that must have found your voice is carried by this burning afternoon in the flames and fires of spring and into my life season. I welcome you.
All the brooks of
unto the Lord now, in the presence of all his people. The courts of the Lord's house, in the midst of thee, O Jerusalem. Hallelujah. I was listening to the wind sing Kol Nidre on the hills. I listened with my eyes as the trees sobbed their leaves. This earth is my synagogue, a spinning shrine of praise, with its congregation of hills and seas. October's trees are davening, swaying and chanting the sound of the Shema, like the old men in my shul in Brooklyn who hummed in prayer, sobbing their atonements. Their singing was as deep as grief, the sound of Baruch falling deep into the sky. Every year my father lights a candle and blesses the light for his father. Someday I will light one for him. I will light it in my songs and in my tears. I cry for my father's grief. I cry for my own deep grief. And I cry for the grief we have not seen yet. Today is the Yom Kippur, a day as deep as grief. I sing Baruch deep into the sky to the wind that now listens to me.
La 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 la
Dave Marston. Dave Marston, whose name didn't get on the program, who's also leading the choir and sings with me on this song. David, that was such a mystical poem. It was so beautiful, and everybody today is into mysticism. And everybody wants to fly, but nobody wants to touch the ground. And it reminds me of a story that I heard from my teacher, the famous Reb Zalman Schachter, the Philadelphia Rebbe. Reb Zalman tells a story about a chassid. You know what a chassid is, right? Chassid is a disciple, a Rebbe is a master. The chassid, his name was Shmuel. Shmuel was walking along the road. And as he's walking along, he's carrying his bag on his shoulder. He's got a song in his heart and a prayer on his lips because he's going to see the Rebbe, the great Reb Shneir Zalman, in the town of Liozna. And as Shmuel is walking along, all of a sudden he hears coming down the road, clippity-clop, it's a carriage. He turns around, he looks at the carriage, and there is this guy sitting in the carriage. He is a dandy. I mean, he is dressed in pretense from his toes to the top of his head. The guy looks down at Shmuel, he says, "Where to, young man?" Shmuel says, "To Liozna, to my Rebbe." The dandy says, "Oh, I happen to be going there too. Well, why don't you come on up because I'd like to hear about him." So now Shmuel is sitting next to the dandy in the carriage, and he says, "And who are you?" The dandy says, I am a Kabbalist. I am the grandson of a Kabbalist, the son of a Kabbalist. My grandfather was into the Kabbalah up to here. My father was into the Kabbalah up to here. And he said, I'm into the Kabbalah up to here. And he points to his knees. So, Shmuel says, wow, you're a Kabbalist. That's the most amazing thing because, could you help me with a text? The guy says, a text? Sure, I could help you with a text. Shmuel says, well, I was reading in the great Eitz Chaim, the Tree of Life of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, and there I found a scrap of paper with a mystic passage on it that is so cosmic and so puzzling that I need help in understanding it. Well, the dandy says, well, let's hear it. So Shmuel pulls out the piece of paper and he goes like this. He says, and you have to do this in the right chant. It's like this. In the very primal beginning, there was chaos. All was sundered and separate, grainy nuclei unconnected, swirling, then flat. They were all in one sphere. The sphere unfolded into an orb. On the orb, lines appeared. Forces cut the space into fields. These fields became centered in a point and enfolded the point. Peace was made between the fiery angels and the angels of the vital fluid, and in their cooperation, all came out as it was supposed to be. What a text, says the dandy. I've never heard anything like that before. Is it from the 16th century? No, that's too recent. It's more ancient than that. Maybe it's medieval from the 13th century. No, it's got to be even older than that. Well, Shmuel says, well, but I want to tell you something. He says, look, I'm just a little snip of a chassid. And when I get to Liozna, it'll take weeks before they let me see the Rebbe. But you a Kabbalist, the grandson of a Kabbalist up to here, the son of a Kabbalist up to here, and you yourself a Kabbalist up to the knees, you who ride in the chariot, surely they'll let you get to see the Rebbe right away. And when you see the Rebbe, could you ask him about this text? Well, The dandy says, sure, I'd be glad to do that. Let's go over it a little bit. And they begin to chant. In the very primal beginning, there was chaos. Anyway, doesn't take very long. The dandy gets to Liozna. He gets an audience right away with Reb Shneur Zalman. And immediately he says to the rabbi, he says, well, here's a text I have. Let's look at this text. The rabbi says, a text? Great, let's hear it. So the rabbi closes his eyes, and the dandy Kabbalist begins to chant, in the very primal beginning, and he starts going on, and the rabbi is looking, he's looking from one end of the universe to the other. He's looking into the deepest places, from Alpha to Omega. He's looking, and finally, the text begins to make sense. The rabbis, the text makes sense. It's Creplach. Sure, listen, the rabbi says, look. In the very primal beginning there was chaos. All was sundered and separate, grainy nuclei, unconnected. That was the dough. Then flat. They were in one sphere. Right? That was the flour, now the dough. And the sphere unfolded into an orb, so the dough was rolled out flat. And lines appeared, and forces cut the pieces of space into fields, and the fields became centered in a point and enfolded the point. Pieces of meat were put in the dough that was cut in little diamonds and folded over it. He says, and then listen, hot water was put in the kettle was put in the fire. The Creplach were put in. Peace was made between the fiery angels and the angels of the vital fluid. And in their cooperation, everything came out as it should be. So you know the dandy Kabbalist, he really got a lesson in Kabbalah, And then when Shmuel finally got to see the Rebbe cracked up. The Rebbe laughed so hard when Shmuel came in, and he said to him, hoo, what a dish you cooked up.
Para bailar la bamba, se necesita una época de gracia para mi parte y arriba, por ti seré, bamba,
David.
I'm in the middle of
Wait, what?
We're in a concert.
David.
Synagogue.
This is rude.
This is not Jewish.
It's a Jewish music concert.
What do you mean
I don't want
Jewish?
to sound xenophobic.
This is a
or anything
Jewish
like
song.
that.
Is this a Jewish song?
What do you mean Jewish?
This is Jewish, the Moranos of Spain.
More like maracas.
Mariachis or something.
No, it's a Latino song. But isn't this a Jewish song, huh? All right. Jewish, huh? They want Jewish. Should I give them Jewish? All right, I'll do it in Jewish. I'll give them Jewish. Avenu shalom aleichem. 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 Avenu
everybody. Avenu Shalom Alechem, Avenu Shalom Alechem, Avenu Shalom Alechem, Shalom Alechem, Shalom Alechem, Avenu.
Jewish rock and roll. Oh, yeah. Everybody ready, guys? Here we go. Oh, you can pray and you can sway and you can daven anyway at the shul. When the rabbi starts to sing and take your talents and get swinging at the shul. Do the spiritual sensation that's sweeping the nation at the shul. Well, let's go to the shul. Well, let's go to the shul. Let's go to the shul. Let's go to the shul. Come on, let's go to the shul. Well, there's a spark around the ark when you whore around the Torah at the shul. Do the mitzvah, don't forget it, and you surely won't regret it at the shul. Yeah. Tune your heart to the station, be a light into the nation at the shul. Everybody, let's go to the shul. Yeah. Let's go to the shul. Come on, let's go to the shul. Let's go to the shul. Come on, let's go to the shul. Hey, Brother Garrett, take your son off.
You didn't know what you were in for tonight. Well, you know, some people don't believe anything that they hear. These people have to see things to believe them. Lithuanian people are like this, doubters. They used to call them Litvaks. And a long time ago, in a little Ukrainian village called Nemirov, one of these doubters, a Litvak, happened to wander into town just before Rosh Hashanah, the birthday of the world. Now, as this Litvak walked through the little village, the villagers' heads turned. A stranger was an event in Nemirov. And as he walked through the marketplace, the grain merchant took it on himself to walk up and say, "Welcome to our town." And the Litvak said, "Thank you." He was about to walk on, but the grain merchant continued, I think I know why you've come to our town at this time of year." "You do?" "Well, yes, I think you've come to see our rabbi." "So why would I want to see your rabbi?" "Well, it's well known that our rabbi is the holiest rabbi in the world." "Your rabbi, oy. Every town thinks its rabbi is the holiest rabbi in the world, please." "No, our rabbi is the holiest rabbi in the world." And the other villagers who were, of course, listening in agreed. "Oh, our rabbi is the holiest rabbi in the universe." "All right, tell me, What makes your rabbi so special? Well, all right. Every Friday morning, in the days before the new year, our rabbi disappears. Your rabbi disappears? No. Yes, he isn't anywhere. He's not in his house, he's not in the streets, he's not in anyone else's house, he's not at the shul. He simply disappears. So we know where he goes. So, tell me, where does this holy rabbi of yours disappear to? Our rabbi raises himself straight up to heaven. He stands in front of God, and with his own mouth, he asks God personally to forgive the poor, sinful people of Nimrod. Oh, please, don't tell me fairy stories, you're a rabbi. God admits our rabbi into his presence. What more proof do you need that our rabbi is the holiest man in the world? Please, even Moses had to die first before he went to heaven. All right. If you don't believe it, then where does our rabbi go when he disappears? I don't know. Really, I don't care. But after the villagers had gone, the Litvak started to think about the story, and, well, he couldn't get it out of his mind. And after a while, started creeping into his head, maybe there was some truth in it, and being a Litvak, he figured he couldn't believe it, he would have to see it. That night was Thursday night, the night before the supposed disappearance. And that night, the Litvak sneaked into the rabbi's house. Now, it wasn't locked, because who would steal from the holy rabbi of Nimrod? He walked right into the house, he walked right into the rabbi's bedroom, and he got under the rabbi's bed. And he waited. Now, after some time, he heard the rabbi come in, heard him come right into the bedroom. He could hear him getting undressed, getting into bed, and eventually snoring. Well, another man under the bed might have fallen asleep, but not the Litvak. He kept himself awake all night long, reciting verses from the Bible in his head. Finally, a few hours before dawn, he heard the rabbi get out of the bed, and then he heard him start to get dressed. Now, the Litvak peeked out from under the bed, and he could see that the rabbi wasn't putting on his usual long black coat and white stockings and fur hat. He was pulling on a pair of baggy old trousers and a coarse smock and a wide leather belt studded with nails, a peasant cap and tall boots. He looked like a common peasant. Then the rabbi walked out of the room, and the Litvak tiptoed behind him, crouching behind the furniture, and he saw the rabbi grab an axe off the wall, sling it through his belt, and walk out of the house. Now, the Litvak continued to follow him through the narrow side streets of the town till the houses got further and further apart, and the Litvak realized that they were in the forest. Well, the Litvak hid behind a bush, and he watched. The rabbi took out that axe, and he began to chop down a tree. And after he had felled the tree, he started splitting it into logs, and then splitting the logs into sticks. And the Litvak was astounded. Here was a rabbi, a scholar, a holy man, acting like a common peasant. Then he watched as the rabbi took a rope and bundled up the sticks and slung that bundle over his shoulder and started walking back towards the town. Now, the Litvak continued to follow him till they were on the poorest street in the town. And the rabbi stopped right in front of a very ramshackle hut. The windows were cracked and stuffed with rags, and the door was falling off the hinges. And the Litvak watched as the rabbi walked right up to that house and knocked. And the Litvak could hear a voice coming from inside the house. "Who is it?" "It's me, Vasily." Vasily, who? Vasily, the wood chopper. I have wood for you, very cheap. And the rabbi walked into the house. Wood? I have no money for wood. It's all right. You don't need money. You can pay me later. When will I get money? I'm a poor widow. It's all right. I trust you. Can't you trust in God? All right, but who'll make the fire? Do I look like I can get out of bed? And the Litvak watched as the rabbi walked over to a stove, started taking the sticks and piling them in. As he did, he said a prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Then he began building the fire. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. And then when the fire was blazing, he piled up the rest of the sticks next to the wood stove. And the Litvak, who was still watching from the window of the house, was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Now, in the days that followed, the Litvak stayed through Rosh Hashanah, through Yom Kippur, and quite a bit longer, and he became one of the most devoted followers of the rabbi. Now, some days later, he happened to run into the grain merchant, and the grain merchant said to him, "How is it that you, who were such a doubter of our rabbi, have become one of his most devoted followers?" And the Litvak just shrugged. "But wasn't it you that doubted that our rabbi was the holiest man in the universe?" The Litvak nodded. "Well, something must have changed your mind. What changed your mind?" "I saw it with my own eyes." "You saw it." "I followed the rabbi." You followed the... You mean you... And did our rabbi, in fact, raise himself straight up to heaven? The Litvak looked at him, smiled, and said, "Even higher, even higher."
שימחו את ירושלים וגילו בה כל אוהביה, שישו איתם משוש כל המתאבלים עליה, עליה. שמחו את ירושלים וגילו בה כל אוהביה, שישו איתם משוש כל המתאבלים עליה, עליה. לה 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 לה
much. Rabbi, they want more.
Well, it says in the Talmud that they can have more.
Do you know any more?
I think I might know it.
All right.
And then they would say no. The Rebbe Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom, shalom, Yerushalayim. Shalom, shalom, Yerushalayim. Shalom, shalom, Yerushalayim. Shalom, shalom, Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Israel. Pray for the peace of Ishmael. Pray for the peace of all the world. All the world shall live in peace. Shalom, 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 Jerusalem. Shalom, 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 Yerushalayim. 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 Pray for the peace of Israel. Pray for the peace of Ishmael. Pray for the peace of all the world. For all the world shall live in peace. Shalom, 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 Yerushalayim. Shalom, 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 Yerushalayim. Shalom, 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 Yerushalayim.
The Shir Hadash Choir.